Everyone, welcome to the Environmental Law Institute's webinar, Community Lawyering for Environmental Justice, Part 14, Environmental Pro Bono Opportunities in the DC region. I'm Madison Calhoun, ELI's Educational Programming Attorney. We are so delighted to see you here today. If you are not familiar with ELI, we are an internationally recognized nonpartisan research, publishing, and education center working to strengthen environmental protection by improving law and governance worldwide. We have a great program in store for you today. Before we get started, I have just a couple of quick logistical notes. First, this program was organized in celebration of DC Pro Bono Week, which is held each fall as part of the annual National Pro Bono celebration. This year, the national theme is supporting communities. DC Pro Bono Week showcases opportunities to do pro bono work, learn new pro bono skills, meet other pro bono lawyers, and expand pro bono horizons. We will post a link to the DC Pro Bono Week website in the chat so you can check out other events that are happening throughout the week. Additionally, I want to thank our wonderful speakers for taking the time out of their busy schedules to join us today. You can find links to their full biographies on our event webpage. We'll drop the link to that in the chat as well. Today's webinar will be recorded and posted publicly to the event webpage and ELI's YouTube page in case you miss any portions or would like to rewatch it later. We will be saving time at the end of the webinar for audience questions. Please submit any questions that you have using Zoom's Q&A function. We encourage you to use the chat at any point to share observations, comments, and resources with one another, but please be aware that we will be pulling discussion questions from the Q&A box, not the chat. And now I will go ahead and introduce our fantastic moderator, Margaret von Rotz. Margaret is a public interest environmental law fellow here at ELI. Margaret primarily works on tracking toxics litigation trends for emerging contaminants and supporting the Climate Judiciary Project, particularly in their international and energy programming. She also works on issues related to environmental justice. Margaret holds a JD from UC Law San Francisco and an LLM in environmental law and sustainable development from SOAS University of London. Prior to her legal career, Margaret was a special education teacher in Hawaii. Margaret, I will hand things over to you. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Madison. Hi, everyone. As Madison stated, my name is Margaret. I'm a law fellow here at ELI. I'm excited to moderate today's panel and demonstrate how pro bono is part of a community lawyering. So here with us today are a couple great speakers that I'm going to introduce to you all, and then we'll just dive right into questions. So we have Seema, Andrea, and Morgana. Seema is a professor of law at the University of Maryland Francis King Carey School of Law. She teaches in the areas of environmental and energy law, administrative law, and clinical education. Her research interests are in pollution control, infrastructure, and environmental justice. She took a 2-year leave of absence in 2023 to 2025 to serve as senior counsel in former President Biden's administration at the White House Council on Environmental Quality. Prior to joining the law school, Professor Kakade served as a federal government attorney with the EPA Office of Civil Enforcement and DOE Office of General Counsel. Before her federal government practice, she worked as a research attorney and co-director of the India program here at the Environmental Law Institute. She has also spent time as a litigation associate in private practice. Andrea serves as a pro bono managing attorney for the Animal Legal Defense Fund, where she works with ALDF's pro bono network to enhance animal protection. Prior to joining ALDF, she served as senior program attorney for the District of Columbia Bar in their communities office, where she managed programmatic content across 20 different practice areas, as well as developed and implemented department-wide programs. She helped launch a diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility initiative, where she oversaw project groups working on improving aspects of diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility in the legal profession. Andrea holds a JD with her certificate in environmental law from the Elizabeth Hobbs School of Law at Pace University and an MBA with a concentration in international business from Pace University Lubin School of Business. Morgana is a pro bono coordinator and staff attorney at Chesapeake Legal Alliance. She joined CLA in 2024. Prior to joining CLA, Morgana was a law clerk at Smouse & Mason LLC in Annapolis. As a law clerk, she worked extensively in plaintiff side environmental civil litigation. She has also interned at the Niskanen Center and Earth Rights International, both in Washington, D.C. In each of these roles, she worked on a variety of environmental issues, including climate change, corporate accountability, pollution, environmental justice, and more. Lastly, she worked as a student attorney in the University of Maryland's mediation clinic, mediating real legal disputes in the Baltimore City community and court system. Morgana holds a JD with a concentration in environmental law from the University of Maryland Carey School of Law. So with that, welcome to our speakers. Let's kick off with our questions. Before we dig into the specifics of what pro bono is, let's address, the elephant in the room. The state of environmental law and really the rule of law has, to put it quite lightly, shifted significantly in the last 10 months. Would any or one of you like to address the importance of celebrating pro bono work in these current times? Other than it being Pro Bono Week, why should we be talking about this?
Hey, Margaret, I'm happy to take that one. Thanks to Eli for inviting me today and to all of our attendees for listening in today. I think this is a really great question. I think we're in a pretty pivotal moment, as you said, Margaret, in the field of environmental law broadly, not just in the last 10 months, but really in the last few years. We've seen a lot of change across national, state, and local levels in the profession. So I just want to zoom out a little bit to acknowledge that there's been a lot of change in the last several years that has, I think, really shifted the way that environmental lawyers think about environmental law. I mean, even in the word environmental, we're really broad. We're at a point in the profession where at a really broad scope of what that means. That can mean everything from big issues like climate change and environmental justice to things that are maybe outside of people's normal thinking of the word environment, to be thinking about something like housing or thinking about like indoor issues, right? Indoor air quality as opposed to only what's outside in the greater outdoor environmental space. We're thinking about wildlife, and we're also thinking about animal rights. We're thinking in terms of scale, global scale, as well as really, really local and everything in between. So that frame of environmental law has really, really broadened in the last several years compared to, I think, people's traditional notions of what environmental law was. And I think that's true even on the legal side when we think about the scope of what environmental law on the law side really means. I think traditionally it's also been very focused in the administrative law space. For those of you that are lawyers, on the call can think back to your 1L course curriculum as a reminder and remember that we do teach a lot in housing environmental law, in administrative law, and there certainly is ample things going on in administrative law. But the field now connects to so many other spaces as well, right? It connects to all of those other core courses that we take as 1Ls in property law, in criminal law, in constitutional law, certainly, in lots of different spaces. And so I just want people to take that framing and know that we are in a shift in all of those areas within the environmental and the law space. And both have grown quite a bit, such that our profession is quite broad. And why that matters in the pro bono space, it matters because we have a lot of opportunity to engage in these shifts that are going on in that broader environmental frame and that broader legal frame as well. And so there's opportunities in the pro bono space in so many different areas. And so while I think the shift can be kind of nerve-wracking and can be scary for a lot of people, and particularly in the profession as a whole, what is really, I think, uplifting is the opportunity to be able to create, to change in any number of spaces in the pro bono field, and for all different kinds of lawyers, whether you are with a law firm, whether you're with a government agency, whether you're with a nonprofit, whether you're in between positions and are unaffiliated, whether you're easing out of the field and going into retirement, but still want to do some work, whether you're a student. So again, we've got lots of different kinds of lawyers at various points in their career because our careers are long. I often tell my students, like, don't worry if you don't get the best job right away out of law school, because for better or worse, you're going to be working for decades. So we have people in multiple different career paths at different stages right now, and there is a place for you to jump in any of the broader environmental or legal shifts that are going on right now.
I completely agree, Seema. And just to kind of add on to that, this is an opportunity to get involved. I know that in the legal field, we're constantly bombarded with these big headlines and things like that. And like I know oftentimes, as I've talked to volunteer attorneys, that sometimes you feel a little bit helpless by the changes that are happening, but working on a case that directly helps an individual or a community group or an organization is a way to make a tangible difference and to feel a little bit more in control. And like also on a positive note, unprecedented times open up opportunities for creative problem solving and using those legal skills that we have. So pro bono work can really be a way to utilize our skills to face these bigger challenges.
And I'll just completely agree with what's been said previously. Yeah, this is just an amazing opportunity for, in a lot of ways, sort of turning maybe some trying times into maybe times to utilize and help. So yeah, I just agree with everything that's been said. I think there are opportunities out there, no matter what area you're looking at, what area you want to look at, things like that. So they're out there, and it's a great time. It's always a great time to get involved in pro bono work, but now even more so. So yeah.
Thank you all for framing that important context for us. And it's definitely going to be like great to think about throughout the session. I'm going to start with Seema. Could you tell us what are the different types of pro bono work? What does it look like?
Yes. So I think when we think about pro bono work, I think it's important to think about skills. Okay. So I already framed out the concept of what we mean when we're talking about environmental and when we're talking about law, big picture. But in between all those two spaces is this concept of what are our legal skills? And Morgana just said, sort of, we have skills as lawyers. What are those skills, right? And that is also pretty broad. Okay. There are people coming from areas in which they've been working maybe in the federal government on one area of the Clean Water Act for a number of years, right? And their specialty is writing regulations, okay? So they're really thinking about administrative law, and that's really where their skill is, okay? There's so many spaces in state issues, in local issues, in other federal issues, and also just in basic writing, in basic analysis, in basic citation. I mean, we forget that these things are skills that lawyers have, but when you talk to community groups, when you talk to individuals that are not lawyers, you realize, right, how much more you do actually know about the legal system, even if you've been sort of focused in one particular area for a long time. To zoom out and know, okay, I do know how to do research. I do know how to cite. I do know sort of the basic of how a court system might work, or I do know the basic of even where to look for a regulation, or where to look for example, a pollution permit, okay? And so those basic skills do come in handy. There's also, really just being able to communicate orally with groups and be able to explain things, be able to counsel people. Sometimes that is more than what groups or individuals are looking for. Is they're worried. They're worried about what's happening. They have a goal to undertake, and they don't even know where to turn. So even a couple conversations, and utilizing sort of those oral skills and talking to folks is a really good space to handle. So I just want to say, I think from a very big picture perspective, there's work in multiple different kinds of legal skills that we work in law school that translate into your careers as well, and into pro bono work: research, citation, writing, client counseling, empathy, understanding of people, being able to navigate. Sometimes I start out with clients in the pro bono space, and I just remind people that there are 3 branches of government, and so that I'm explaining really the different avenues in which they can pursue advocacy, because they forget, right, that there's local levels, state levels, federal levels, and law is not only about a court system. We actually have 2 other branches, and maybe there's space in the legislative system. So sometimes just being able to explain systems of government, which I think environmental lawyers do really well, can be really helpful. So there's a lot of avenue for utilizing a wide variety of skills. And I'm sure Morgana and Andrea have really good examples too in their particular areas of the environmental space.
You're leading right into my next question, which is, I want to know, like, what do environmental, or not even environmental, because we are just talking about pro bono generally. What do pro bono matters look like at your respective organizations? And Seema, feel free to jump back in if you have good examples as well.
Morgana, I don't know if you want to start. Okay.
Go ahead, go first.
Yeah, so I can talk a little bit about what pro bono matters look like at the Animal Legal Defense Fund. So we actually have a few ways to get involved with us. So we do actually work with a number of firms as well as individual attorneys. So you can actually join. It's one network, but sort of two sides of it. And we actually seek pro bono counsel for us as an organization on a number of projects. So you can actually help with us in some of our projects. And sort of what Seema was addressing before, there's lots of different ways to get involved with us as an organization. We do have a litigation program that we, outreach on, but we also have a legislative affairs program that we outreach on. So, the ability to sort of get involved in different areas of the law, depending on what you're comfortable with, what skills you have, what skills you might want to develop, things like that. We also, take on a number of projects from our criminal justice program. That's another one that we outreach on. So there's that availability as well. But then a number of projects also from our general counsel's office. So that's, less maybe of the substantive areas of animal law, but helping us as an organization. So that's really great. We do a lot in employment law or tax law, contract law. So if those are where your skills lie and that's where you're comfortable, we actually outreach quite a bit on projects that involve those areas of law. And then we actually have a system outside of sort of the ALDF projects. For us as an organization, we actually have a system it's called our legal assistance requests. So members of the public actually submit requests to us, and then we work with our network across the country, depending on the jurisdiction. And these are sort of what we call more of like community lawyering. So they're usually involving companion animals issues, but we're seeing a lot of intersection there as well. Sometimes it's helping organizations with contracts or, a rescue with contracts, or sometimes it's, involving property law with a neighbor or something like that. So we do sort of both have the internal us as an organization projects, but also, the ability to work on sort of individual requests that come in through our legal assistance request process. I'm happy to talk more about that, but I'll turn it over to Morgana to talk a little bit about her organization as well.
Yeah, so in a similar vein, we have a very wide variety of pro bono opportunities, as well as a wide variety of volunteer attorneys that do work with us. So for context, Chesapeake Legal Alliance, CLA, we provide completely free legal services, and we try to assist on basically any matter that is related to protecting the Chesapeake Bay watershed. So our work covers all the different Bay states, Maryland, Virginia, Pennsylvania, et cetera, DC. Our mission statement covers a lot of ground. So our clients can include individuals, community groups, environmental advocates, other nonprofit environmental organizations. And so, as you can imagine, we get a lot of requests for assistance throughout the year because there's so many different types of matters that we can help on. So in order to try and help with these cases, we use our volunteer attorney and law firm network. We also have volunteer experts if certain non-attorneys want to work with us, but to focus on the attorneys and the law firms, our in-house work and this pro bono network, through them, we assist dozens and dozens of clients on a very wide range of services. Not only do our volunteer attorneys and law firms get to work on environmental law related issues like enforcement, compliance actions for water pollution, or reviewing permit applications, environmental policy work, they also get to get involved with, just general legal research, drafting educational materials, providing corporate or tax law support, things like that, a lot more than that. But we work with law firms, solo or unaffiliated attorneys, retired attorneys. We work with public and private sector attorneys. And we basically try to match an attorney's skills or just their general interest to the particular project. And so with that being said, many of our attorneys in our network or the law firms, they don't necessarily specialize in litigation or in environmental law at all, but are still able to find opportunities to work on. Like Andrea said, there's a variety of different ways that you can assist environmental work without actually practicing environmental law. And so because we have this wide variety of matters and volunteers, how the environmental pro bono work looks will vary based on the matter itself and the volunteer assisting. So always trying to find a way to get people involved is what we do.
And I'll just jump in with one other thought on this, which is thinking about, there's a lot of law schools that have clinical programs. Some people may be familiar with how clinics work, but clinics in general are opportunities for students enrolled at that law school to take a clinic where they work on pro bono matters under the direction of a licensed lawyer and a professor. It's part of a school requirement where they get credit to be working on pro bono matters under the direction of that professor and licensed lawyer. And a lot of law schools have them. I think there are probably close to about 45 environmentally oriented law clinics. And some of them are called environmental law clinics. Some of them are tangentially related to that broader field of environmental law. So you can think about community economic development clinics, which are more transactional in nature typically, but work on a lot of environmentally related issues in the transactional space. So between all of the different kinds of clinics that are out there, there's a lot of space for students to get involved in their clinical programs at their law school. And for practicing lawyers that are interested in engaging with clinical programs, for our clinic at University of Maryland, for example, we often have lawyers that come in and do guest talks on various issues, which can be really helpful. We often also have lawyers that help co-counsel, okay? And so if we've got a lawyer that doesn't want to take on an entire matter through another organization or by themselves, sometimes they'll work with me on a co-counsel matter, which can really help for two attorneys to work on a matter together. It helps with expertise, it helps with time and resources. So that I think there are a lot of clinical programs that are happy to co-counsel with lawyers as well if there's a matter that someone doesn't want to take by themselves, and it helps the professor as well. So I just want to mention the co-counsel model, which I think not only clinics use, but lots of different pro bono organizations will use as well.
And if I could just add, in addition to what Seema said, for any law students who are in the audience, so I know as a law student, getting involved in pro bono can sometimes be maybe a little intimidating. How do you get involved? What opportunities are there for you? There are definitely opportunities as a student. I know I work with a lot of students that come through like our externship program and things like that. And I'm hearing more and more that, schools are asking students to do a certain number of pro bono hours for graduation or certificates or things like that. So there's definitely opportunities, throughout with a number of different organizations. Obviously, I can speak for, the Animal Legal Defense Fund, but we do work with students, who need to, meet some sort of pro bono hour requirement or things like that. A lot of it involves research. Research projects are really great for things like that. There's also other opportunities to get involved in things like legislative work or maybe some regulatory areas as well. So there's definitely areas for law students to get involved and opportunities for them as well.
And just to add to that, even if you're affiliated with a law school that doesn't have a pro bono program, just reach out to legal service organizations like us and see, are there ways that me as a law student can get involved? Because a lot of times we will work directly with a student, even if they're not affiliated with a particular pro bono program at their law school, and give them a research project. So fear not if you're not in a program.
That's so great. Thank you all. That was perfect. Before I ask my next question, I did want to ask, because we talked about like environmental work and like also like how it can be like environmental adjacent, if we could like zero in, because this is like a series about environmental justice. Do any of you have any examples of what pro bono work might look like in terms of advancing environmental justice?
Yeah, I can start in that space. So I think in the same frame that I started the conversation talking about the word environmental and how broad it is, and the word law and how broad it is, I'll do the same on the word justice, okay? Justice is a really, really broad term, okay? So I just want to frame for people what that often means. We think about things like fairness, right? In the word justice, that kind of concept of fairness comes to play. And what we also want to think about when we think about fairness in the legal system, broadly speaking, are multiple different kinds of fairness. So we can think about something called procedural justice, which is fairness in just the process, regardless of whether it's an environmental issue, a criminal issue, or anything like that. We just want people and individuals and groups and communities to be able to have fairness in a process, access to any kind of policy system, legal system, have their voices be heard. Okay. So in the frame of justice, that is a whole field by itself, which is procedural justice. Okay. Really different than other areas of justice that might be something like restorative justice. Restorative justice is really sort of a concept on remedies and a concept on thinking about how to achieve remedies. So if communities or individuals have been harmed or have been the individual, this happens in the criminal space a lot, have been the ones that have been are doing the harming, how do we bring groups together in a restorative way rather than in a punitive way? Okay, so there's lots of different frames of justice in the environmental justice space. All of these frames come up. Okay, we have a lot in the procedural justice space for the environmental justice space. We think about things like basic public comment in the administrative law and the regulatory space, and giving people a voice through the opportunity public comment, which many of our environmental laws have required public comment opportunities, right? Or in the legislative space in the state, my group does at the clinic does a lot of work in Annapolis, which is our state legislature during the legislative season, and helping groups have a voice to provide testimony on maybe a new bill and how it might impact them, or an amendment to an existing state statute that might be up in the policy realm. So again, that giving people a voice is a huge part of the justice world. And when we think about environmental justice on a sort of a topical level, we can think about where there's been fairness and unfairness in access to resources. So in the natural resource and park space, right? There's a lot of opportunity to get involved in making sure that certain areas, I'll give an example, in Baltimore City, which is where I work and practice, we have a lot of wonderful parks and really, really challenging access issues for certain neighborhoods to get access to those parks. It might be that there's a highway separating a neighborhood to the park, right? So how do we remedy that from a city planning perspective? Can we think about safety measures so those kids in that neighborhood can walk over to the park, right? And that's an access issue, and that's a real challenge in a place like Baltimore City, okay? Or another area of access in Baltimore City comes up with respect to food. Food access is a real challenge for certain neighborhoods where they really, really lack grocery stores and basic infrastructure for food access. So my clinic has done quite a bit of work in the urban agriculture space, which delves into property law, and it delves into a lot of different issues on agriculture, which is a whole different area of the environmental space, but has an adjacent area to justice and to really fairness and access to resources and to healthy living. So those are a few examples that I can speak to that my clinic has worked on in Baltimore City in particular at really local levels. And of course, there's the big national levels if we think about things like climate change and exposure on flooding, exposure on wildfire, and who has the ability in a really extreme weather situation to get out and who doesn't. And we can think about a lot about people like the elderly, right? And a fairness issue on safety evacuation measures. And so in a lot of Western states, particularly, there's a lot of conversation about justice for various kinds of groups like the elderly or like people that have disabilities on safety routes and evacuation during extreme wildfire events. So we've got justice issues at really, really large global scales, Margaret, and at really local scales, and in all of the different spaces. And in the procedural realm, as well as the substantive realm, as well as the restorative realm. So that frame of justice can connect to almost any aspect that you work on in the environmental or the legal space.
Absolutely. I love that. Thank you so much for that framing and really painting that picture for us about how lawyers and pro bono work in general can be a part of some really exciting solutions. Morgana or Andrea, is there anything you wanted to add there? Can I move on?
I mean, I can talk, Seema, you covered a good, really great overview of that. I can kind of go specifically into something that CLA deals with a lot in the Chesapeake Bay states in the regional area, we do get a lot of like environmental justice overtones in our matters. So one of the biggest ones that we get are land use and development matters that are targeting environmental justice communities. So we constantly get requests for assistance to help with opposing certain developments that might have major negative environmental impacts on the Chesapeake Bay watershed. And so environmental justice communities will form groups and come to us asking, how do we oppose this? How do we stop this? And oftentimes in the context of pro bono work, these matters can seem a little intimidating because of how complex land use laws can get with local and county level ordinances or zoning laws. So we tend to see these cases don't get placed as much, but we try to always encourage volunteers to think beyond just full representation on a matter. Like, you could fully litigate and represent these community groups and try to take it all the way to the end. But like Seema said, providing guidance on the process, making it more accessible and understandable. Education of legal processes is absolutely essential pro bono work that you can utilize and get involved in. And it's especially helpful for some of these communities that might not have access to educational materials, internet, video conferencing platforms, things like that. So that providing litigation strategies for them to use or another attorney to use down the road, just figuring out certain ways to make things more accessible in any way is helpful.
I agree. Yeah, I echo what Morgana said, sort of that, we work in sort of that legal assistance request space as well. That what Seema mentioned is sort of this, procedural justice, that access to justice, basically. So there's definitely lots of opportunities, that we work on as well that connect into environmental justice in sort of that broader sense. I think one of the things that we always think about is, obviously as the Animal Legal Defense Fund, we're always thinking about sort of the animal involved in situations, but there's always a human element as well. And so, that environmental justice aspect, I think a lot of people think of a big connection for us is sort of the animal agriculture, factory farming connection as well. So definitely a lot of opportunities and many organizations, out there to sort of connect into this area as well.
Thank you all so much. Those were all such great examples. I kind of want to dig in a little bit more into what pro bono work might look like and maybe some of the questions that some people in the audience might have. So Seema, I think you mentioned earlier a little bit that there's a difference between affiliated and unaffiliated attorneys who might be seeking pro bono work. What are some common questions specifically for unaffiliated attorneys who are new to pro bono?
Yeah. So, we've got, as I mentioned earlier, lots of different kinds of lawyers at various points in their careers. Okay. And so sometimes the easiest way is if you are employed and your organization, like for example, at a law firm, has a pro bono program. There's usually a person at the law firm that is staffed to help law firm lawyers fulfill, requirements if the law firm has requirements for their lawyers to do pro bono work, or just because they want to. And so that is a really sort of natural and fairly easy way for lawyers that are already a part of a law firm pro bono program to get tapped in to do pro bono work. Okay, but there are also a lot of lawyers that don't have that access. Right, they currently are with a government agency, or they currently are at a small law firm that doesn't have a pro bono law firm, sort of process already built in. And there are people that are retired. There are people that are in between jobs, right? So we've got people all over the map. And there are issues that might come up that make it a tad bit challenging for people who don't have sort of the one-stop shopping person to go to. And what I will say is, if you connect with a organization, largely like the Animal Legal Defense Fund or Chesapeake Legal Alliance, or any number of other groups in Baltimore City, we have, for example, the Community Law Center, which is legal services in Baltimore City. There is usually a person like Morgana and Andrea on that end that can answer a lot of questions for you. Things like, how do I get malpractice insurance? Things like I'm a government lawyer or I was a government lawyer and I'm worried about government ethics rules. Where should I go? What about conflicts? What if I worked on a case that might be related to this issue a year ago or 2 years ago, right? There's usually people you can talk to about any number of those kinds of questions. And I encourage you to do so, okay? Because often they can be resolved and they can be resolved because other people have asked those questions as well. And there is a way to resolve them. And if there's not a way to resolve that particular matter, I think a lot of pro bono groups have so much work happening that they can shift you to another issue without a problem. Okay. And so those kinds of questions on things like insurance, on conflicts, on ethics, on government ethics specifically, there's usually a person you can go to either within that organization that you are with currently or with the group that you want to work with. And I'll turn it to Andrea and Morgana as well for, if they get those kinds of questions as well.
Yeah, I can jump in. Yeah, we definitely get these types of questions, frequently from all types of attorneys, whether you're affiliated, unaffiliated, what you're affiliated with. So these are definitely common questions that we experience. I would also just maybe add some other questions that we get, or questions related to things like time commitments, questions related to experience, which I know we touched on a little earlier. So there's definitely lots of opportunities. Obviously, I know with the Animal Legal Defense Fund, things like time commitments, as Seema sort of mentioned with conflicts and things like that, we can shift to different projects. We have projects that are very small and only take a few hours up to projects that you could be participating in for months or potentially years. So yeah, definitely, a wide range. And again, as we sort of touched on earlier, that experience element as well of, if you're not specific, like the question that I get a lot is, I don't have specific experience in animal law. Is that okay? And, as we've talked about, there's definitely lots of areas to get involved in, connects to a lot of different areas. So yeah, absolutely. These are type of questions that, I get frequently. I talk to people about frequently. So I echo what Seema said about, if you are having these questions and there's an organization you want to work with, there is probably someone you can talk to either at that organization or depending on what your organization or firm is currently, there might be someone there as well that you can connect with about these questions.
I totally agree, Andrea and Seema. We do a similar thing where if certain time commitments don't match up or the expertise doesn't match up, we try to provide or accommodate different opportunities to them. However, we also try to remind attorneys of like limited scope representation, limited legal representation. We always try to, if someone is very interested in a particular case, but maybe is worried that their expertise might not be able to carry them through the entire case, or they don't know where they're going to be 2 months down the road with their capacity. So we often try to let them know that like, hey, if you want to narrow the scope of your work, of your assistance for this client, we can work with them and try to set up a way for you to do legal research on this matter that they can utilize down the road. And we can set it up for another attorney to take it on later. We try to focus it on just like, oh, we just need this transactional issue, but we're not actually going to help later down the road when you need to do X, Y, and Z. So just kind of asking different questions about how you can get involved and if there are different ways to tap into a particular opportunity is really helpful. And obviously you would do that with someone like me or with like Andrea or whoever is their pro bono coordinator at the particular organization. Another question that we often get, and this again relates to the expertise, is whether trainings are provided. For CLA specifically, we try to provide training guidance on things that we have expertise in. So our in-house staff is pretty small, but we have a wide variety of expertise related to environmental water issues and pollution issues and permitting, et cetera. So we do our best to try to make sure that our volunteers know that they can come to us for guidance questions. We will try to go through certain processes that we have expertise in. However, since we cover such a wide variety of matters, that does mean that like tax law, corporate law, those types of things do come up, and we can't say that we have expertise in that, and we unfortunately can't provide specific training for that. But oftentimes that's where a law firm, they have a supervising attorney that comes in, or for us, we have our network of volunteer attorneys who are very helpful in a variety of ways. We might reach out to someone in our network who we know has tax law understanding and maybe like connect you with them so that they can assist with whatever questions a volunteer attorney might have. And so there's a lot of problem solving, and we do get a lot of different questions, but it's always, we always try to work as best as we can to resolve them so that you can get involved in whatever way you want to.
Sounds like we've covered kind of like a wide range of what the common questions can come up for attorneys that are new to pro bono work in general. We do have a question in the chat that I think would be good to address here. So even though this is a webinar obviously geared more towards lawyers who do pro bono work or are interested in it, do any of you have any thoughts on scientific and engineering professionals who used to work with the federal government and no longer do, but clearly have a lot of expertise to provide, particularly with environmental policy and regulatory experience? How can they get plugged into any type of volunteer work at either at your respective organizations or at organizations you know of or work with?
I'm happy to start, particularly on the technical side. I think this is a great question. There is, as you said, Margaret, we've been focused on pro bono work for lawyers, but there's a tremendous need for pro bono work from folks with technical expertise, because often lawyers rely on technical expertise in a variety of matters. Okay, we rely on technical expertise in lots of different spaces. We rely on technical expertise for people that have experience in geography and GIS mapping that can come into handy on a lot of different water type of cases, groundwater cases, surface water cases, and understanding GIS systems can be helpful there. Certainly things that are more in the pollution oriented space require a lot of technical expertise, because chemicals and particular pollutants are very, very specific, and we rely on technical experts in those very specific niche areas. Okay, so there is a tremendous need for technical support as well, and I can't tell you the number of times that I think the pro bono legal world has struggled, not because of the legal issue that's a complex issue, but because they're challenged by the lack of technical expertise in the matter. So those of you that are out there in the audience that have technical expertise, I'll say one, often it's very specific, sort of where your technical expertise can be of most value. So a really good way to think about this is, let's say you have expertise in one particular kind of pollutant. I'll just put that out there as an example. And you know which agency, federal agency or state agency particularly addresses that pollutant. You often can figure out which organizations on the pro bono side are doing work in that space as well. Okay, so as an example, there's an organization called the Environmental Protection Network, EPN. You can Google them and find them pretty easily. They are engaged in a lot of pro bono matters on pollutants that EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, regulates in various chemical spaces and pollution spaces. So those people that are interested in particular pollutants that EPA might regulate might go to EPN, the Environmental Protection Network, as a place for technical expertise. Okay, that might be really different than if your technical expertise is in an area of sort of infrastructure like transportation and highways and things of that nature. You might not go to a nonprofit or a pro bono world that is focused in the chemical space, but maybe that's focused in the transportation space. And there are many nonprofits that do operate in the transportation space. So I would say for technical expertise, what's your particular area? What are the nonprofit groups that work in that particular area, and reach out to them, because I'm sure they will be very happy to get a call from you.
Yeah, I completely second everything Seema just said. Technical scientific experts in the environmental field are, especially if they're interested in doing pro bono or low bono work, is an incredible resource. Just to kind of put it in context for CLA, obviously we get so many different types of requests for assistance, and oftentimes they do need certain specific technical expertise in order to help them along. And so we absolutely try to take on volunteer experts whenever we can, and please feel free to reach out if you would like. On the other hand, like organizations like CLA, when we're doing our in-house litigation, constantly rely on the wonderful expertise of volunteer experts. And so if that is what you're interested in doing, yeah, reach out, like Seema said, find the organizations that do that work and reach out and see how you can be involved. Or reach out to a pro bono coordinator like myself and be like, I don't know if you guys actually do this type of work. Who else do you know of that I could work with? And we would be more than happy to connect you with any other partner organization, other state organization, anyone else that might be able to utilize your skills.
Yeah, I also completely agree with what's been said. We frequently work with technical and scientific experts on a number of both, cases for our organization from many of our different programs. But then also, I know in our network through our legal assistance request, they also speak with experts as well. So there's lots and lots of opportunities, I think, there. So for, all the non-attorneys in the audience, yeah, definitely, as Morgana said, reach out to us, reach out to organizations that you think you might want to work with to see if there's an opportunity there. But I think there's lots and lots of opportunities out there for non-attorneys as well.
All great answers. I think you all kind of touched on this idea of that even if there's expertise that they might be able to provide that your organization can't use, you can kind of plug them into other organizations. That leads perfectly into my next question, which is, what are some national or maybe other state organizations that are great resources or you could point people towards? I'm sure there are people in the audience that, even though we made this about DC Pro Bono Week, since we are a DC-based organization, clearly there's a lot of work to be done outside of DC. So I kind of just want to make sure that those who aren't based in DC or maybe want to do more national focused work, like what resources or opportunities are there? And this is for all of you to answer.
Yeah, I can start. So a lot of groups are national in nature and have maybe state chapters, for example. So that happens quite a bit. I'll take in the purely justice realm, think about the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU. It's a national group with state chapters in multiple different areas. They're a great group to call if you're interested specifically in the broader frame of justice issues. There are groups like the clinics, right? I think I mentioned we've got 40 to 50 different law schools that have clinical programs in multiple different universities across the country. You can certainly reach out to your local law school's clinic director and say, I'm interested in this particular area. I have this particular expertise or legal or technical, and they often can connect you. Either think about who else in that city or in that state might be interested in having you work for them or work with them. So there are a lot of national groups with state chapters, and there are a lot of types of organizations like clinics. And I know Morgana is going to speak to river keepers or water keepers, which are a group that have a substantive commonality. Like clinics are designed for clinical education, and therefore they're across multiple different law schools, and because they've been repeated across multiple different law schools. And so there's a lot of different models to get involved outside of the DC area, either with national organizations with state chapters or a model that has just proliferated. And so it exists in multiple places. In multiple different areas. And so those are maybe two examples of ways to get involved outside of your area. And then I'll just mention a third one that I think is a growing area, particularly for people that are really interested in sort of federal government kinds of issues. And there's a lot happening in that space right now. There's a pretty large group of what I would call federal agency alum organizations. So groups like the one I just mentioned, which is the Environmental Protection Network, which was formed many years ago from former people who worked at EPA, who are now retired or now in other spaces and are interested in the mission of the agency that they worked for and are doing pro bono work in that space. Okay, so there's another group called Justice Connection, which is an alum group of former folks that worked for the U.S. Department of Justice, and they're taking on a bunch of matters because they're they're interested in what the mission of the U.S. Department of Justice is, and are now no longer at the Department of Justice, but are interested in that mission overall. So there are groups like that from the federal space that are alum groups that are interested and are doing a lot of pro bono work. So that is also a place to kind of look. National Park Service has a similar alum group as well that's working on various park issues. So those are some examples, Margaret. I'm sure Morgana and Andrea have a lot of great thoughts in this space too with their organizations.
Yeah, so from an animal legal defense fund standpoint, we are actually a national organization. So we actually work across the country. Obviously, we work in the DC area as well, but yeah, we actually work in pretty much across the country. We actually have staff across the country as well. So yeah, we are definitely a national organization that, you know, no matter where you're looking to get involved, where you live, where you're licensed, things like that, we definitely probably have opportunities there. There are lots of other, you know, from the animal protection movement standpoint, there's also lots of other national organizations that, you know, you can reach out to that, you know, have opportunities as well. You know, I just throwing names out there like the Humane World for Animals, PETA, ASPCA, things like that, those large national animal protection organizations. But yeah, as I said, Animal Legal Defense Fund, we are a national organization. Our legal assistance request process, we get in requests from all over the country, all different jurisdictions. Our network of attorneys is, you know, we have attorneys in every state, licensed in every state. We reach out for Animal Legal Defense Fund projects, you know, quite frequently across the country as well. So definitely lots of opportunities, whether you're in the DC area or if you're, you know, outside or looking for opportunities outside of the DC area as well.
Yeah, though CLA is a regional organization, environmental issues, water quality issues tend to happen everywhere across the states. So because of that, we have a lot of connections throughout the entire United States. And we're happy to kind of connect people with particular groups, or like Seema discussed earlier, the river keepers or water keepers. They are boots on the ground organizations and, you know, individuals that are really tuned in to what exactly is happening in that area, specific to the water bodies that are in the surrounding areas. So clocking into what they're doing can open you up to a lot of different opportunities and to see what's going on in your local area. And yeah, if you don't know where to start, it's always helpful to reach out to, you know, someone like CLA or ALDF or whoever to try to figure out what's going on near you, how you can get involved, and who to contact about that. So absolutely start reaching out to any of us.
I feel like that's a running theme of this session, which is don't be afraid to ask questions and don't be afraid to reach out. There's clearly a need, and it's good to be proactive about it. This kind of leads into my last question, which is what advice would you give to, well, really all of the groups we've talked about here. We've talked about different types of attorneys involved, scientific and technical experts, law students, clearly lots of different types of people who are interested in taking on pro bono opportunities, whether it's an environmental field or not. What advice would you have for someone who's new to the space?
I would say just try something. Just give it a go. Give it a go. It can be something small. You'll learn so much, and it's such a great opportunity to actually expand skills as well. We sometimes get into our careers and think of ourselves as this kind of lawyer, as this kind of expert. But what I think pro bono offers is the opportunity to just take a chance and take a risk and try something completely new. And it can be really fun and really engaging, sort of like picking up a book in a section of the library that you like normally never go to, but you decide, I'm just going to try science fiction this time, even though my heart's in like historical fiction or whatever. Like, you're just going to try something new. And, you know, it doesn't have to be a forever thing. You know, like Andrea and Morgana said, there are things that you can do just for a few hours. So it's like that book that you pull off a shelf. If you don't like it, you don't have to continue reading it. And you also don't have to like continue reading in that genre again. So, but you finish the opportunity that you took on and try something small and start there. But if you don't sort of try even something small in the get-go, you never know what kind of opportunity. You might love it, you might be challenged by it, you might find it really interesting. So it's just a really, I'll just circle back to the very beginning of the conversation, which is in the moments that we're in of a lot of challenges in our legal system and a lot of challenges in the environmental system writ large, and a lot of people very worried and concerned about where their own careers are going and where their own professions are going. It is an opportunity to just engage a little bit in something positive. It really is a mood lifter. It really helps you learn new skills. And so I guess that's just my advice. Just give it a try, something small. Start somewhere.
I totally agree. I think just kind of looking at what's out there, visit legal aid organizations' websites, try to see what open opportunities are out there. This way you get to see what's actually going on and what you can get involved in. And also think about your skills. Are you hoping to learn more about environmental law and acquire new skills, or are you hoping to use what you already have and apply them to a matter? This can kind of help you figure out what kind of opportunities you can take on. And like Seema said, maybe go outside of your comfort zone a little, challenge yourself. And in that same vein, don't be afraid to like ask questions. Like we talked about, environmental law is very technical and you're not going to know everything. And so that shouldn't discourage you from taking on a pro bono matter. Play with the idea of taking on something smaller, less intense, and slowly build up to the point where maybe you're a lot more comfortable with applicable laws so that maybe you can take on a full case down the road, but you have to start somewhere. And then another piece of advice, this might just be particularly for maybe like law firm attorneys that are interested in doing certain pro bono work but haven't been able to. Get your law firm involved. If you see an organization that you like, but notice that their opportunities aren't disseminated by your pro bono manager, ask them about it. Try to connect them with that organization. It's all very helpful, and that goes for unaffiliated attorneys. Reach out, figure out how you can get involved. Same with law students. Just reach out and ask how you can get involved. It's never going to hurt to ask.
Yeah, I completely agree with what's been said. And yeah, I would say definitely, as Morgana said, just reach out. This is like what I do at my organization. So I'm always happy to talk to anybody who might have an interest. If you have questions, if you're trying to learn more, feel free to reach out. I think everybody I meet in the pro bono space is, wonderful and amazing, and they're always happy to answer questions. This is the work that we really enjoy doing. So I think, don't be afraid to reach out. We've been asked lots of questions before, but again, there's people like me, there's people like Morgana at organizations who this is what we do. And this is, where we work. So we're always happy to talk to people who have questions and who are interested in, pro bono work with us or other organizations.
Thank you all so much for the inspiring and interesting insights. I'm going to turn it back to Madison now, as that concludes our webinar.
I give a huge thank you to our wonderful speakers. Thank you to Seema, Morgana, and Andrea for joining us for today's program, as well as to Margaret for moderating. We so appreciate each of you taking the time to have this conversation. Thank you as well to our audience for tuning in. As we said at the beginning of the webinar, this program was recorded and the recording will be posted to ELI's website and YouTube page within a few business days. Be sure to check out DC Pro Bono Week if you have not already. There are so many more events happening throughout the week. We posted the link to that in the chat. And with that, I will close this webinar. Thank you all so much and have a wonderful day.